me at the back. All right. I'll try to be audible. So, hi, I'm Anita Ihuman, and I'm going to be talking about contributing to cloud native open source communities, a detailed roadmap. So, a little bit about me. I got into cloud native out of ignorance. And by ignorance, I mean I didn't know the community I was contributing to was cloud native until a few moments or a few months after. And then I realized I had to understand what microservices are, Docker, Kubernetes. And I started writing articles on these topics. And I realized I'm in the cloud native ecosystem. So I'll just give you a run through on how you can get in without being ignorant like myself. So I'm Anita Ihuman, like I said, a developer advocate, previously at Kivano and now at API 6, both cloud native communities. Currently a technical writer at API 6 and API Gateway, a cloud native API Gateway under Apache. So I'm also a contributor to quite a number of open source communities, Layer 5 and Chaos being the top of those. I love cats, although my cats ran away. We'll look for it. So during this topic, we're going to be looking at these lists. I'll try to run through it as fast as possible because we don't have so much time on our side. So let's get to it. What exactly is cloud native? When we're talking about cloud native, we're talking about an approach of building and running applications that leverage and make use of cloud computing softwares, cloud computing services, using the cloud computing model generally just to run the applications. And there are quite a number of these, but then does this mean cloud native is the same as cloud computing? Well, it's not. Cloud computing on its own is generally a term that refers to delivering services that are available on your cloud instead of on your system. So cloud native infrastructures, rather, on the other side, are softwares or hardwares that effectively run cloud native applications. So we're talking about these tools that enable the cloud native applications to run perfectly. They are the infrastructures behind this entire work that's done. And when we're talking about cloud native, a lot of persons get confused because you can't talk about cloud native without looking at some of the core pillars, which of course include DevOps as the number one. So DevOps is simply the cultures and practices that involve the developers or the engineers and the operations team working together to make sure that the deployment of our applications goes smoothly, and the general communication between these is termed DevOps. And then we have containers, of course. Containers, on the other hand, are small units that consist of our dependencies for your applications, for your cloud applications. And then we look at microservices. So microservices, as I don't know if I mentioned, okay. In cloud native applications, most of them are collections of small divisible components that rely on themselves. So these microservices are what we call these. Yeah, so we have the CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. And this is the period from the idea conception down to the deployment and running of your cloud native application. So that's basically CI/CD. So when you're getting into the cloud native ecosystem, you're expected to have a bit, even if just definitions, because you'll be seeing terms like this on a daily basis, and you don't want to be the ignorant little contributor like myself. And so, like I said earlier, microservices look at communication amongst your application APIs, and also supports independent deployable updates, like I mentioned earlier. Then DevOps, on the other end, we're talking about automations and the quick deployment of production of environment, collaboration between development and operations and management. Then we're also talking about continuous delivery, which I pointed out earlier, from the time of the conception of the business idea or your application idea down to when it is deployed and running fully and even being maintained. Then containers, and where we look at the optimal carrier of these microservices. If you go in depth, you're definitely going to know that these are not very technical things, but there's not so much time on our end. Now, we can talk about Cloud Native without looking at CNCF. So CNCF is a project under the Linux Foundation that is responsible to foster adoption of these Cloud Native softwares. There are tons of projects that are Cloud Native, but prior to this time, not a lot of persons knew about them. I mean, I mentioned APIs, Apache API 6, and not so many persons were aware of it. It's a Cloud Native software as well. So yeah, this community was put together by Linux Foundation to make sure that these softwares and these products are adopted by not just more than one person, but the entire world. And so far, we have over 450 members under the CNCF Foundation. And top of the founders, I mean, the earlier adopters or companies that became members were Google, Red Hat, you have Cisco, VMware, and the like. So you see these top organizations came together to make this CNCF exist. And under CNCF, we have this landscape project. It's not very clear, but if you type CNCF landscape, you're going to see all of these projects. So these are like projects that are termed cloud native. They're termed cloud native because they provide cloud services for you. And if I zoom, you're going to see that there are applications under storage, there are those under data and DevOps, there are those that handle your API gateways and communications. There are also different under policies, automations, and all of that. And all of these are under Cloud Native community. And so if you want to start your contributions, you should be looking at some of these. And the thing about Cloud Native is that you can get into Cloud Native or CNCF without going through one of these projects, because CNCF on its own just answers the body. But if you go through one of the projects or communities under CNCF, it will be a lot more easy for you to get into the community. So now, how do you start your Cloud Native contribution journey? It's just like contributing to every normal open source community, to be very honest. And it starts with identifying a community. Like I said, you can't get into CNCF without having a project that you're curious about, to want to get in. And you can just start as a contributor, but then it's not that easy. So identifying the Cloud Native community is the number one step. And how do you do this? Now, the landscape project I listed out, I showed earlier, had like tons of projects that are currently under Cloud Native. You can do a research on these based on your skill set and your experience. What do you have at the moment that you think you can contribute to this community? So what do you have at the moment that could help you gain your experiences if you go through with a particular project or community? So basically, research on a Cloud Native community and ensure that it aligns with your goals. And are you familiar with the programming language for this community? That's another key point to look at. First, for me, I got in and I had no idea of Python, Golang, and all. I was even struggling with JavaScript. But I joined as a front-end developer, and I was willing to learn what it is all about, because I see that every single person is scared when it comes to Cloud Native communities. Everyone is scared because they're like, you're going to be learning Docker. That sounds really, really complex. But I can imagine. So yes, you have to be familiar with the language. If you're not familiar, then try as much as possible to have a bit of an understanding. And then something that make sure you're comfortable with the onboarding steps. Several Cloud Native projects currently do not have a smooth onboarding process into getting in. And so if you're not properly onboarded with how a project runs, you might be in a community for 10 to 20 years and still not understand what the project is all about, the problems it solves, and how you can be useful to that particular community. So try to be comfortable with the onboarding steps while you're getting in before you actually dive in. And also find out if it's Cloud Native or open source. Now you're looking to get into the Cloud Native ecosystem. So that's like one of the things you have to research about. Is it really Cloud Native, or it just inculcates one line of a Cloud Native code and that is it? So is it really, really Cloud Native? That's the thing you should take into consideration. The next is to find a niche within the community. And finding a niche is very, very important, because you can't be everywhere. No matter how diverse your skill sets might be, you really can't be everywhere, and especially for your own personal growth. So find an area that you think you're best at. Could it be design or front end or back end, or the operations where you actually get to, work on this DevOps aspect? Could it be documentation? You saw earlier that someone applied for Google Season of Docs and got into the Cloud Native community. And that was his first time actually contributing to open source, but he was able to get in. So you could settle with documentation or community and relations. By community and relations, I'm talking about program management, advocacy, content writing, or even community management and all of those. So you see these areas. If you get into a community, try to find out who is in charge, how can you get into these particular areas, and then settle all of your energy in there. And then once you get into this community and you're confident that yes, the community accepts me, I'm comfortable, I think I can go to the next step. You have to start understanding the basics. Now that's where you start to learn what exactly the monolithics and then microservice architectures are, because you can't even escape this part. And these are not really, really complex things. Monolithic era was just when we had all of our applications put together in one box, from the dependencies down to the APIs and databases, all of them in one box. So it was really, really a huge thing to move about, to deploy, to share around, and make changes. So we progressed to the microservice era, which is the cloud native we're talking about. And these ones are in tiny bits, so it's easy to make everything scalable and fast for us. Then you can also advance learning about containers, which is not a very complex act, and then scheduling and orchestration, where you see topics like Kubernetes, Docker, and the rest, and then cloud native infrastructures, like I listed out earlier. These are tools or softwares that actually deliver these cloud native services that we're looking out for. So you can just start by learning all of these and a few others that probably are not here. And what next? This is the Cloud Native Tail roadmap, of course. I'm not sure if very clear there, but it looks good on my end. So identifying either settling for containerization, which I pointed out earlier, or orchestration, CI/CD, service proxy, distributed, and all of those are very mandatory, because you might just get into a community and your previous experience was more on, let's say, you have very little or no idea of CI/CD. That's the Git, GitHubs, and all of those. You have very little experience about it. And you get into a community with all agitation and eagerness to, contribute to this community. You might just have to experience that pause. Because if it's not something you're conversant with, you have to go from the scratch to start learning all over again. So this is just a roadmap to help you walk through. And sincere apologies, it's not clear on this end. So once you actually figure out that, you find various ways you can contribute. First, you see, like I said, it's like every normal open source community or contributions. You can improve code, which some persons focus their attentions on, if that's what you're comfortable with. Personally, I get scared of improving code, particularly with, I just came here to tell you because I feel like you should get into Cloud Native community. Yeah, so you can also organize programs. We are working on extending Kubernetes and the concept of Cloud Native around Africa, the KCD team, and I'm part of the organizers. So organizing programs like this will also be a way to get yourself to contribute to Cloud Native community without being in the code-centered areas. You can also hold workshops with your groups of friends, just sharing about Cloud Native topics and all of that. You could create learning resources and maintain projects. By learning resources, I mean writing articles, video content, explaining some of these projects that are very complex for other persons. I noticed that a lot of persons avoid documentation, so you could create video content or technical articles that explain this concept in the most basic way for beginners, and you're already on your journey to contributing to Cloud Native. I'm going to give you one hint. One of my employers reached out to me through my beginner-friendly articles on Kubernetes and Docker. And I didn't think that would go anywhere, but it did. So you could create content too. You can also maintain these projects, this cloud native project, and like I said, community relations as well. It's a place to get involved. Then marketing and outreach. Tell persons about cloud native to tell them about, if you're working on an API gateway project, for instance, walk up to people and tell them that, yeah, we could help your company with this API gateway tool that is cloud native. And you're already on your way to making good contributions towards cloud native community. And also there are cloud native communities and groups that actually focus, because the CNCF community is a really, really large one. If you get into CNCF itself, you might get overwhelmed. So there are like tiny groups under CNCF that you could get involved in, one of which is the special interest groups, or the working groups, of course. So these are just like small group of persons that say, yeah, we share the same orientation. We see that these particular situations need to be addressed. We could be meeting weekly just to talk on these topics or this. So these are groups within the CNCF that you could also get involved in, that you meet several persons. One of the persons I met through CNCF working groups is Chris. He presented earlier in the main hall. And you can also look at the cloud native community groups. Most of these there's a community group for Nigeria. There's a community group for almost every country or continent generally. So you could just check out the CNCF community group, and you see tons of those. You could help facilitate the events or contribute as a speaker, or even help advocate on these community groups. You can also join the CNCF tag group and tag network, and get yourself contributing to the CNCF community. Moving forward, there are also hands-on learning. Earlier, Chris talked about getting into cloud native by taking some certifications. So there's hands-on learning materials that you could actually learn more about Kubernetes, particularly because if you notice, you can't talk cloud native without talking about Kubernetes. That's simply because in the year that CNCF was released, Kubernetes version 1.0 was launched in the same time. And so Google donated it as a seed project to CNCF. So you can't see CNCF without seeing Kubernetes sitting right next to it. So you can see lots of courses on getting, learning more about Linux, learning more about Kubernetes, and all of these. On these learning resources, I will definitely provide my slides, so you can click on some of these links. There are also interactive labs provided by the CNCF to help you learn and understand things about cloud native generally. And you can also buy some ebooks, one of which is Kubernetes in Action. I'm going to refer that one because it's really helpful. I have used it to learn for my certification, and it was really, really helpful for me too. You could also check out e-learning courses that are available on cloud native topics. And talking about certifications, there are lists of certifications, but I'm going to only highlight the ones under the CNCF particularly. So we have the Certified Kubernetes Administrator for those who are on the administration end and you're an expert or generally a cloud engineer. You can just jump into this and get one. I know a couple of persons in the crowd here who have one of these. And then you can get the Certified Kubernetes Application Developer. Now, this is not the very technical part. This one's not as serious as the CKA, but it's actually a good add to your resume because I know so many companies jump on or are excited to see their employees have this. And recently, a lot of companies prefer that once you're getting into the company, you have to have one of these. And so it would be a good add to your resume, especially if you want to focus on cloud native for a long time career. Then we have the Certified Kubernetes Security Specialist for those who are more on the security end. Then the Cloud Foundry Certified Developer, that is also under the CNCF that you could also check out. Then the Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate. So this is, I talked about CKA and CKAD. So these are like the fathers, and this is the child of these courses. So if you have very little or no idea on what cloud native is all about, you can start with this. It's like an objective focus kind of certification. It gives you time to practice Basically, just understanding the intro aspect of Kubernetes, Docker, Cloud Native, and yeah, topics like that generally. So you don't have to do a lot of practical work during the certification. You just have to understand what these concepts are all about and you ace it. Then we also have the FinUp certified practitioner. So you can check all of the certifications and get yourself one. I know Didi recently earned hers, which made me realize I need to take mine soon. And then you can then share it with the community. There's actually no learning without sharing with the community. I had a conversation with someone earlier and they said they love the fact that I'm always putting myself out there, and this is scary for me because I know how scary it is. So regardless of how scary it might be, try to share with the community because learning alone doesn't put you out there. I think Dominion mentioned this in the first sections earlier. So apply to speak at cloud native groups if you're comfortable as a speaker. But if you're not, you could also settle for writing content and creating YouTube videos. You could also create more videos and tutorials. I know a lot of cloud native focused sites that are looking for content creators and people to actually write tutorials, courses on Kubernetes, Docker, and all of those topics. So you could decide to create content for other persons to come and take certifications on these topics. You can also collaborate with persons within the ecosystem and start your own cloud native project that could solve a problem for the entire cloud native ecosystem. And that's just about it. You're already on your way to getting into the cloud native community generally. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. You can you can reach out to me on Twitter. This is my Twitter handle. You can just drop a message, and I'd love to help you in the best ways that I can. Thank you.